When people talk to me about freedom, and I talk about freedom a lot, what they're almost always talking to me about is financial freedom. And so let's talk about that today. I am fortunate enough to be able to have said I got to retire early. I got to retire in my 30s, around 35 is when I retired, and I did it basically by accident. And today I kind of want to share with you the lessons and the story of how that happened to me, and hopefully those lessons and techniques and strategies might help you as well. Hi, my name is Tyus and I make videos about personal freedom, personal liberty. This video is all about retiring young, which is something that I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do. I basically retired around the age of 35, and I'm gonna share with you the ideas that helped me get there. But I should also point out first, maybe the definition of retirement, because it is kind of personal for each person. Some people believe that retirement is when you never have to work again, maybe based off of getting a lot of money, maybe it's off of having a low cost of living. For me, I believe retirement is when you have enough assets, enough things that give you money that you never have to work again because they provide for your financial needs. But the freedom that you experience from retirement is about a lot more than just money. It's also about relationships, it's about psychology, it's about having the youth, vitality, the energy to live a free life. And that's what this channel is all about. It's not just about money, although that's what this video is going to be covering. So if those are factors or thoughts that interest you, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell so you're notified when I come out with new videos. And also I should point out that in this video, we're going to talk a lot about kind of the psychology, because everybody's life is different. Everybody's circumstances are going to be different. So rather than saying, this is what you must do right now to grow a business or to invest properly, I do have videos that are gonna be talking about that. Again, another good reason to subscribe. But this video is more about the strategy and the things that I'm looking for in life, and essentially my story on how I got there and the lessons that I learned that I think would make sense and could be transferable to somebody else, and something that is practical for other people to implement in their daily life. So we got 15 of these. We should dive in. The number one skill set to creating wealth in your life is to identify what people value. This became very clear to me when I was very, very young. I grew up pretty poor, and my first job was essentially begging for money out on the street. I was doing magic tricks and juggling out on street corners in order to get tips. And I learned very quickly that where I positioned myself was going to matter a lot. So I found that if I waited in places where people were in a rush or trying to get to their next place and they were valuing their time more than anything else, I wasn't going to succeed. And so instead, I found that I could position myself out in front of the local movie theater where people were waiting to be entertained. And that was the perfect place to entertain people in order to ask for tips, and essentially busk is the term. So that's where I went. I basically identified what people were valuing at that place and time, and I provided them with that to make money. This is obviously a very small scale, but this is all any organization that makes money does, is they essentially offer people value. They give them a solution to a problem that that person has, and they essentially give them money in exchange for that. So the number one, first of 15 steps or techniques, is to identify what people value. Now, step number two is trading the resources that you have. I'm constantly asking myself the question of what are the things that I have in my life that I might not be utilizing to its full potential. Now, if you look at your life and you're like, I don't have any extra resources, there's nothing that I'm not utilizing to my fullest potential. Well, we're all born with time, and that's often where we start our journey in creating wealth. We end up with a day job. For me, I worked as a dishwasher. I ended up working in sales at Radio Shack. I worked in fabrication at Texas Instruments, making computer chips in a little lab. So ultimately, if you have no resources, look at the time that you have. But as you grow, you're going to have more and more stuff in your life, more and more things in your life, and identifying, hey, you know what, I have a car now. Maybe that means I could offer ride sharing, or maybe that means I can help deliver things. For me, I recently, within the last couple of years, I noticed that I wasn't utilizing my garage, and so I converted that into a money-making thing, but there's more on that a little bit later. Step number 3 is to build your personal value. What makes you valuable to other people? It could be a skill set, it could be what you know. In fact, most people refer to it as specific knowledge, which is an idea that was really pounded home from a book that I read recently called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which was given to me by a gentleman named Dylan Vanis. So if you want to check out that book, I'm going to have a link in the description. And if you want to check out Dylan's YouTube channel, that is linked below as well, because the book's amazing and it's given away for free on the website. So check it out. You don't even have to give an email address. There's no strings attached. And this might be the best book I've read this year so far. He talks about specific knowledge being something that you can't just learn, you can't automate it. This is knowledge that must be taught to you by either a master or something that you have to apprentice under, or something that you have to do so long that you essentially build a skill set that's really, really hard to train. These type of skills would include sales is a good example of it, or listening, communication, or things like, for me, it was magic and how to entertain people. These are things that are really, really hard to automate. So if you can find a way of essentially building your specific knowledge, do it. And often the best place to do that is at a job. Back in California where I was growing up, a magic shop opened and I went to work there. And at that magic shop, I learned a lot more about entertaining people, and I learned a lot more about sales and business. So find a job that you love, but in the process of doing that job well, build your skill sets and your specific knowledge so that your personal value becomes irreplaceable and people have to pay you because you're irreplaceable. Number 4 is to respect compound interest. When I turned 18 years old, I walked into a Sears store and I bought a camera because they gave me a credit card in the store. They're like, here's the credit, you got $800 in credit you can use, so I bought an $800 camera. Well, that camera ended up costing me over $2,500 because I didn't make all my payments on time and because interest was working against me. However, I learned from that 1, I can destroy my credit real fast, but 2, that compound interest is a really powerful force in generating wealth. Now, when it's working against you, it creates poverty. It makes you spend way too much money. So if you can ever avoid it, don't buy anything on credit or anything that's going to be working against you in interest. However, there's going to be times in your life where you're going to potentially be able to use interest in your favor. And interest is not just a financial metric. Compounding is something that applies to all areas of life. When I said it ruined my credit, your credit is about your reputation. And as your reputation gets better, you can compound on those results until they climb. Your relationships are the same way. As you build a group of friends, they might introduce you to other friends they have until those relationships grow and grow and grow. Your health can be the same way. As you get healthier, you're more likely to be able to work out harder and run faster and all of that good stuff that comes with it. And learning can also compound. So as you learn and you read and you gain knowledge, that knowledge can stack on top of each other until you have this massive library, this lexicon, this plethora of information in your mind that you can utilize. So respect compound interest. It's around you everywhere, and realize that it can either work for you or against you. Number 5 is to learn how to scale. Now, scaling is one of the problems that a lot of businesses face when they start becoming successful. What it is the ability to go from serving a small group of customers to serving a lot of customers all at once, or being able to manufacture some product to being able to manufacture tons of product, because you got to get it out to everybody. It's one of the hardest business problems, and it's something that everybody actually deals with in their life unless they choose not to scale. So when I grew up in Northern California doing magic shows, I could only scale so big because it's really not an entertainment mecca. I didn't have people coming in and out of town. So the only way that I could scale was to move to a place that was an entertainment capital of the world, or at least one of them. So New York was an option. I also looked at Austin, Texas, because they had a cool place down there called 6th Street, but I decided not to go there because entertainment wasn't big enough there, and I ended up moving to Las Vegas specifically because Vegas had such a life and a culture involved around magic, which was what I was doing at the time. So that was an easy way for me to scale. It was choosing where I lived. And if you haven't made choices around this, this is really, really important. People will often move without putting a lot of intent and thought around where they're moving to or who they're spending time with. Those decisions impact you on a bigger scale than almost anything else you do. Where you live, because it changes everything. It changes the culture around you. It changes the people around you. It changes the economics around you. It changes the supply and demand. So where you live is really, really crucial, and who you spend your time with. They say that you become the average of the people you spend the most time with. So if you are spending your time with people that are really not going to be bettering you or bettering society or growing, then they're probably not people you should be spending time with. You should find people that inspire you, that push you, that make you want to grow and that want to celebrate your wins. So find ways to scale, and the best ways to do that is by changing your location and by changing who you spend time with, or spend time with people that add great value more often. Number 6 is to be really, really flexible. And that sounds super easy, but it's really not that easy. I was working as a magician for most of my life. That's what I loved to do. I liked being on stage. It gave me significance, importance. It ultimately became part of my identity. People would introduce me and they'd say, "This is Tyus, he's a magician." And people would be like, "Wow, that's so interesting." And it got ingrained in me that that is my identity. That's what people view me as. And it was very, very difficult at one point for me to stop doing magic. I essentially retired from show business, and I was like, you know what? I'm done with that. I'm done with that section of my life. But it was hard because it was part of my identity. And I see people holding on to their identity, and because of it, they lose flexibility in their life. They say, you know what? I am a salesperson. I work for this company, and that's who I am. You don't have to be anything. You can be anything you want to be, but you can also let the identity that you have go at any time. I wonder how much pain is caused by people thinking about themselves as a unit of a greater collective. So for example, people say like, I am Christian, which is fine if you're a Christian. I'm not putting any stigma around that. However, when you say I am, now anytime somebody would give any criticism to Christianity, you might give pushback saying, hey, you know what, you're attacking me, when they're just attacking an idea. They're attacking a philosophy. And when you detach your identity from whether your job or groups you are with or faith, if you detach that and say, these are things I believe in, but they're not who I am. I'm more than that. I'm more than just my age and gender and height and skin color or whatever. It doesn't matter. But if you can detach from all of that, you become incredibly flexible, and that essentially can make you grow a lot faster. So when I retired from magic, I put that aside and I was like, you know what? I don't have to be a magician, and I ended up working for Apple Computers or Apple Core or Apple Inc. Apple Inc. at the time. So I ended up working for them for a long time, and it was only made possible because I could let go of what I was before. Number 7 is not to increase your expenses. As you get older, you'll find that you'll gain more skills, you'll become worth more because you have more talents and abilities and specific knowledge, and so people will start paying you more and more money. And as you make more money, you'll find that you'll spend more money. And you might spend more money on clothes or on food or on online subscriptions or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is, if your burn rate of how much you spend always goes up with how much you earn, you will never escape the rat race. There's no way out that way. So what you have to do is find a way of taking the increases in your earnings and never having it impact your lifestyle. Once I started working for Apple and I was making more money, I would take every raise that I had, and if I got a 5% raise, I would add 5% to my investments. So I never even saw the raise ever. I would never even notice that I was making more money because I was taking that and investing it away from my take-home income into my investment portfolio, which meant that I had more money essentially to use in the future and more money that was making more money for me. So don't let it get away from you. It's really, really easy to grow and expand as a person until you look around and you're like, oh my God, these car payments, these payments on this massive house, all of this insurance that I need to buy, it can get overwhelming. Think of finance like a bathtub. Everyone focuses on the income. They want to make more and more income. So that's like filling the water more. That's having more water come out of the spigot. But there's also the drain. It's how much water you're losing. And if you leave the drain open, it doesn't really matter how fast you are filling up the bathtub. It's going to drain out nearly as quick. So you've got to plug that hole. You've got to stop spending. That's the only way to get out of this rat race. So as your income increases, don't let it impact your lifestyle. Use that money. Find a way of automatically making that money work for you in investments so you never feel it. Number 8 is to not let perfection make you miss opportunities. They say that perfection is the enemy of good. And so what that means is a lot of people don't get to do good things because they wait for a perfect thing to come around. And because of it, they miss a lot of opportunities. Let me give you an example from my life. I ended up purchasing a home, but I didn't do it under perfect situations. I didn't have 20% down in order to buy this house. And so because of it, I ended up having to pay some mortgage insurance. There were some drawbacks to me. However, had I missed it, I would have missed this economic crash of 2008, where I was able to buy a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath house for less than $80,000, which was a pretty amazing opportunity. Had I waited until I had the 20%, I would have missed that opportunity, and I would have essentially missed owning that property, which would have been a real bad thing in my life. So when you see a great opportunity, maybe it's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. If it's a really wonderful opportunity, take advantage of that opportunity, and don't let that thing in the back of your head where you say, you know what, it's not perfect yet. Don't let that get in your way of taking the first step in taking advantage of it. Number 9 is to pay for opportunities that will help you save or earn more. When I started working for Apple, they were offering this stock purchase program where they were giving us essentially a discount on stock that we could sell basically instantaneously. So if I was getting 15% off on stock, I could take that, buy the stock and sell it, and I would essentially make 15% increase instantaneously. So by spending a little bit of money, I made more money with it. A lot of companies offer 401k match programs where if you invest a little bit of money into your 401k, let's say you invested 3%, they would match that same 3%. If they match 6%, then invest 6%. Whatever it's going to be, essentially that's a raise. You're earning more money by giving yourself more money. By saving money, they're essentially matching it to make you earn more. And there's other ways of doing this. So for example, if you were to pay your mortgage bi-weekly, you end up paying a slightly more every year, but it's going to reduce the amount of interest you pay on your mortgage. Another way of using paying yourself early to save and earn more is to pay a mortgage early enough and enough so that you don't have to pay mortgage insurance. You can essentially escape mortgage insurance, or what they call PMI. So these are ways of, you're prepaying essentially something you're gonna have to pay anyways, but you do it so that you can escape this additional bill. I guess for everybody else, if you have credit card payments, well, you're probably paying interest on those payments. So pay a little bit extra to your credit cards to get those things paid off, because that interest is really gonna add up. Number 10 is don't be afraid to get help. You know, there's times when you just can't do everything yourself. In fact, that happens to most of us, which is one of the reasons why relationships are so important. Now, I mentioned earlier in one of the earlier steps that I bought a camera when I turned 18, and I did it on credit, and I destroyed my credit in the process. And I didn't even realize what big impact that would have on me until later on when I tried to buy my very first house, and I ended up having terrible credit. I couldn't get approved. So I ended up buying that house with a friend because my friend had great credit. So we ended up buying the house together as joint owners, but we used his credit for the mortgage because I couldn't do it alone. So there's all kinds of opportunities in life where you're gonna need help. It's one of the reasons why you should look after your relationships and cherish them whenever possible. So don't miss out on that chance. Get help when you need it, and when available, provide help to others too, because that just makes you a good person. Number 11 is to take and accept assets over earnings whenever you can. So yesterday, I had some people in this exact same studio that were shooting a video, and they were asking, hey, how can we pay you? And they were starting a company. And I said, you know what? Why don't I take some equity in that company? Basically what I'm saying is they don't have to pay me money. Instead, why don't I take a small percentage of their business, and as their business grows, I'll own that percentage of it. An asset is simply something that is going to pay you time or money over time. So I'm essentially investing in them. There's a lot of startup companies that will pay equity in the company early on rather than paying their employees because they don't have the money to pay employees. So what they're doing is they're giving the employees part of the company. Apple did it when they started off. A lot of companies do. Another way that I have taken assets over earnings is when I moved from one house to another, I didn't sell the old house. I could have, and I would have ended up with a nice chunk of money, but instead I decided to keep that same house and rent it out because the earnings over time would be really, really beneficial to me. Essentially, I'd be making residuals. Even before that, I was doing this when I would come out with a magic product. Rather than selling it off and getting one nice lump sum, I would instead say, why don't I make royalties off of this? So that every time you guys sell some, I get some back. If I had sold the product to them and given them the copyright on it, they'd still be making money on it and I wouldn't see a dime to this point. So essentially this is like having a fruit, and rather than just eating it, you plant that fruit so you grow a tree, and now you've got all the fruit you want because every year you can harvest more. So again, step 11 is when you have an opportunity to take an asset over an earning whenever possible. The next one is to have multiple outs when something goes wrong. Now, remember that house that I told you about that I bought with a friend because I didn't have the credit to afford it? Well, we got that in a really bad time in US history. People were giving out subprime mortgages left and right. And my friend ended up with the mortgage under his name because I didn't have the credit to get that house. So ultimately, the house dived in value. We ended up underwater. We had gotten a subprime mortgage. It was a terrible situation. And I told him that we should short sell the house. We couldn't keep it because we couldn't afford to pay for this subprime mortgage forever, and we lost money on the house. He didn't want to sell the house, and ultimately because the mortgage was under his name, he didn't have to. So we had another option where when I got into that, I had the option of letting go, of getting rid of the house and basically giving it to him. Now that wasn't ideal. Obviously, we would have been much happier had everything gone up and everybody won, but not all the time. You don't win all the time. In fact, you lose a lot in the process of life. And so knowing that I was going to lose, I had that secondary option for me as a way out. So I lost the house. I lost all the money that I put into mortgage payments for that house, but it gave me a secondary way out. And so it's important when you're getting into situations that could have massive consequences that you build in multiple potential strategies for getting out of those situations. Step number 13 is to find multiple ways to win. Now this is a lot like the last step where you're finding multiple outs, but unlike finding multiple outs in case you lose, you can also find multiple outs to win. And let me give you an example of this. When I moved into my new home, I noticed that we had this big garage that we weren't utilizing except for storage. And I was like, you know what, there's something else I could do with that. I just don't know what it is. So I ended up deciding to convert it into being part of the house, made it essentially into another room with its own little kitchenette, its own bathroom. It was a pretty nice place. And I essentially had three ways that I could win with this. The first way was that I wanted to turn it into a short-term rental. Think of like Airbnb. People could come to Vegas, they could stay in there for a short period of time, rent it out, and leave. But there was always the risk that the HOA or the county wouldn't let me get licensing to do that. So if that had happened, I would have turned it into a long-term rental. I could rent it out to somebody for a 6-month lease or a 1-year lease. So I still had a secondary way of winning. And even if that didn't work out, I knew that if I invested this money into that home, it was going to increase the value of my home. So no matter how I played it, I was always going to win, even if cards got dealt against me that made me seem like I was going to lose. Find multiple ways of winning, because that way, you know, the analogy where they say like, shoot for the moon, if you miss, you'll end up in the stars. Well, this is what they're getting at. They're getting at the idea that there's multiple ways of winning if you plan correctly. Don't rely on the fact that you're going to fall and suddenly land in a blanket of stars. Probably not going to work that way, but if you think through things before you act on them, you might be able to find multiple ways of winning even if your initial intent didn't work out. The next one is, don't be afraid to quit while you're ahead. It's totally okay to stop at any given point, especially if you're winning. Now, people that come to my hometown of Vegas, they go into casinos, they gamble, and it's surprising to me how often they will win and then continue to bet until they lose. There's so many opportunities where they could just say, I'm gonna stop and take the $100 I won and walk away. But for some reason, that's just not built into our minds as a way of living. When you're ahead, it's okay to stop at any given time. Now, for me, I've just continued to roll forward, and I didn't learn this lesson until life kind of did it for me. I lost my wife, now my ex-wife, and my job all within about a month of each other. And I didn't learn until that moment hit that it was possible for me to live off of the assets that I had earned up until that point. The property, the rental stuff, the businesses, passive income I had had before that. I didn't know all of that was enough to fund my life. And it became possible when, one, I didn't have the job that was constantly feeding me a salary every month, and it became possible when I didn't have another person that I had to take care of as well. When those two things were gone, I realized, oh my God, I'm financially free, and it happened when I wasn't even paying attention to it. I didn't even know it happened. So if you find yourself winning the game and you're like, you know what? I've made a bunch of money on this investment. Maybe the stocks have climbed up. It's okay to say, you know what? I'm gonna walk away. I'm gonna take the profits I've had. Because eventually, if you stay with it long enough, things change. Eventually, an investment might go the other direction and you could lose all that you gained. Take the wins when you got them. It's okay. Here's something really important for you to know, and it's something that I can only share because I've experienced it, and I hope you experience it too, but have a better result than I do. Retirement is less important than your purpose. And when there will reach a point in your life when you don't have to work anymore, you'll find that you have a lot of time. And you'll find that there's not necessarily a great reason to continue living if you don't have a purpose behind you. And so it's very, very important to understand that while the goal for you may be to not have to work again, realize that there's probably something else that you could be doing, that you might want to do. And so while I don't have to work at this point, I still work. I do it every day. In fact, I work probably longer hours than I did before, but I don't do it because I have to. It's because it's something that I want to do. I work really, really hard to find ways that I can help other people become free, whether that's financially free or free within relationships or whatever that might look like to them, whatever freedom might feel like to them. I want them to reach that, and I want you to reach that. And that might mean I need to come out with more videos and produce more content all the time. But the point is that having purpose is a lot more important than just having freedom. Freedom honestly doesn't have a purpose to it. Freedom just gives you liberty. Knowing that the other side of purpose is responsibility means that just because you get away from having to do it because you must, because you'll die if you don't, doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a reason to exist and a purpose behind that. I can't emphasize how important this is. It can literally be life-saving when you realize that there's a void in your life that you need to fill. My answer to that is take responsibility for every possible opportunity you can, because that will provide you with purpose. And then you'll be doing what you love, which is essentially what everyone's goal is anyways. If you're enjoying these videos that I put out, please share them with people that might enjoy them as well. Hit the subscribe button because I am a new channel. You can tell. Look at how many subscribers I got. Very small. I need more. Or it's hard to justify continuing doing these videos, and I'm going to continue doing them because I want to share my story, I want to give people this information, and I really want to help other people live a free life. So if living a free life is important to you, hit subscribe. If it's not important to you, if you're like, man, I hope to be shackled for the rest of my life, I hope to never gain freedom, I want to work in a dead-end job forever, then don't hit subscribe. You live you. So I hope to see you on the next video. Bye-bye.